So let's kick off with the first article today, which is, does the age of your company determine your work from home strategy? So this was a post on LinkedIn. It was from Nick Bloom, who I did message last week after our chats about Home Depot, and he did answer. So thank you, Nick. I'm very appreciative of that. But he did a post on LinkedIn about work from home and company age. The data shows work from home is 50% higher in firms founded in the last 10 years and 25% higher with CEOs under 30. There is a disconnect between the old and the new. So folks whose careers have been built pre-pandemic wanted the return to the 5-day office work, while those under 40 want hybrid or remote in their firms. Interestingly, he goes on to say there's a similar split in AI adoption. Younger CEOs and firms were rapidly adopting AI, older ones more doubtful. The split is also in the data. It suggests as younger managers and firms grow, work from home and AI will rise in importance. So my question for our discussion is this simply a case of generational divide in terms of organizational design and culture?
I want to know first, does Nick know that he is sort of this pseudo guest celebrity on Frequency?
No, I didn't say that. I just asked him.
I bet we've talked about the work and his point of view and all that. I'm going to guess in probably 6 to 8 episodes.
Yeah.
Like he keeps coming back up for all of the right reasons. I think what's interesting to me about this one is going into more of the research. It talked about there's this promotion penalty. So part of this trial that he did found that remote workers were 50% less likely to get promoted. So I'm curious then about if younger firms are offering more work from home, does that also creating this weird invisible ceiling for people at their roles? And the other part that stuck out to me too is I think it's very easy to label this generationally, to think through like, oh, old believes this, young believes this. But I think it's also worth talking about the power in the infrastructure that goes into this conversation, because Bloom also noted that CEOs, which in the data, especially men in their 50s, they experience the office very differently from everyone else. So the way they relate to people in the office is very different than everyone else does, which might explain why that generational element is there. But I think it's worth calling out also the power and the infrastructure that's part of that. Because also it's probably pretty great when you're the CEO and in the office. That's probably a really great feeling to have all these people around you. The other part that stood out to me too was this parallel between work from home and AI, where the younger firms, younger CEOs with higher work from home rates are also adopting AI faster. So is this creating another gap? We talk about this AI gap. Is this creating another gap that we see in the workplace?
So I think there's a couple of things for me in this. Is I don't necessarily like the generational divide thing. So we've spoken before about that generation piece, because I think it's not linked to that necessarily. I think what this is linked to is possibly a bit of an empathy gap in leadership. So this is something I've been talking about while I've been doing my credibility work with leadership teams, is making sure that we're being aware of empathy and how that is believing someone else's lived experience regardless of your own. To your point of the office is a different experience for the CEOs, is are we leading with empathy? Are we recognizing that it is a different experience and then what that looks and feels like? And I think that's probably one of those practices that needs a bit more work in certain areas. I think any let me jump in. Any company that is mandating 5 days in the office is not leading with any empathy whatsoever. Let's be clear about that. Yeah. I also think that this sort of alignment between the office and the AI and this ability to test and do new things, for me, that feels more like your appetite for risk or the unknown or any of those things around change, right? I think there is something of, I remember how it used to be and that was great, versus I don't have any frame of reference, so I'm just going to try stuff. And I think that is more the difference. Like if you didn't have that company before the pandemic or you didn't work in that environment, you've got no frame of reference to go back to say, but this was great and this is brilliant and this was this. So therefore you're more willing and open to try new stuff. And I think the AI piece is more your appetite for innovation and things that are different and risk. And I do think maybe not generationally, but I wonder if the older you get, the more comfortable we get in our ways. I feel seen, and how that means that you're not as willing to try, new things or do different stuff. I mean, we've talked a lot about the comfort that people have in terms of being at home and the inconvenience that is a good thing that happens when you're prioritizing seeing your friends or maybe going to the office and some of those things. And I think there's a reluctance to do that the older you get, I think. Right, the next one I want to talk about is organisational culture change and if it's really a thing. So this was a post by Rob Briner, who's posted about his work looking at culture change, asking if it's really a thing. He says the logic is simple. Organisations have a culture. The culture drives behaviour performance. To change behaviour performance, you change the culture. But he goes on to say, but what is a culture? Does it drive behaviour and can it be changed? He references a CIPD review that was from 2022, which addressed some of these questions. And I'm going to put a link in the show notes to that report as well for people. But it says, what is meant by organisational culture? There is no consensus. What is the assumed logic model in terms of how is it supposed to enhance performance? It's unclear. How can organisational culture be measured? There is no consensus. There's limited evidence of reliability and validity. What is known about the link between organisational culture and performance? It's inconsistent links and generally weak, and particularly compared with other factors. What is known about the effectiveness of strategies to change organisational culture? No good quality evidence available. At best, he goes on to say, culture is a description of, not a cause of behaviour. It's the way we do things around here. If the goal is to change behaviour, then it makes much more sense to focus directly on changing behaviour. And this links to my freak out later today too. I am firmly in agreement here. Chuck, if culture change isn't really a thing, then what is the alternative?
I'm worried we're overthinking this a little bit, is my response.
I love that you have said that.
Because I can certainly appreciate that culture can be hard to pin down.
Yeah.
Like it is, especially academically, if you're trying to look at the academics of it. But we all know what a broken culture feels like. So to me, the question isn't whether culture exists or not. It's more, where and how are you trying to change the culture and why are you trying to change the culture? It's not something you just pull a lever and then instant culture, comes out. And the Briners talk about culture is a description of a behavior, not a cause of it. I think that's how we put it.
Yeah.
That's the opposite of what a lot of culture consultancies sell.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you want to change what people do, change systems, change incentives, change policies, do all of that.
Yes. Yeah.
I just worry that we're overthinking this maybe a little bit. And I did go find this one data point, which I thought was interesting, that 78% of Fortune 1000 CEOs believe culture is a top 3 performance driver.
Yeah.
So that's what that research says, but this other research doesn't really back that up at all.
So I think what I love about this is almost what you said there in terms of it's the opposite of what a lot of culture consultants talk about. But the way a culture is shaped, right? Even if you think about your family culture or other cultures, it's through behaviours. It's the behaviours that really link to that. And I think there is a reluctance to talk about behaviours and how much that impacts culture. So even if I think about my work on credible leadership, there's always conversations about culture and behaviours. What's interesting if I think of 2 examples with clients I've worked with, where we're talking about the culture, getting to the behaviours and actually what needs to sit underneath it is hard. There is a bit of a reluctance, I would say, from leadership teams to actually talk about behaviours. Very happy to talk about values, very happy to talk about culture as a whole, very happy to talk about all of that. But when we get into the actual behaviour piece, for some reason, this is where we start to get really uncomfortable. And I think this is why, for a lot of people, work has become quite a tough place to be, because we're not looking at the behaviors, we've got all this fluffy stuff around it about culture, and we spend years talking about culture and doing workshops, and it's lovely. But nothing comes out the other side in terms of behaviors, accountability, what things need to change. So when he says culture is a description of, not a cause of behavior, I completely endorse that. And I would love us to focus more on behavior change programs rather than culture change programs, because I think culture feels like that's over there. It's around us. Behavior is about me, and that's what makes it uncomfortable.
I was thinking about this too when he used the term organizational climate and then organizational culture. To me, let's put this in weather terms.
You do love an analogy.
I do. I love a good analogy. So the climate is something that is actually studied and consistent and changing, and it's not, it's like where the water temperature is rising, like whatever degrees, like that's the climate. So when people talk about, oh, it snowed today, what's global warming? Well, that's weather. That's the stuff that changes on a daily basis, an hourly basis, season of the year, whatever. That's sort of what the culture is. That as people come and go from an organization, that weather is going to change.
Yeah.
And if that day-to-day activity, but what's the climate? That's the part I think that leaders probably control the most.
Yes. Yeah, I quite like climate. And we talked about it a bit in the report I did with Dr. Kevin Rock about the value of internal comms and that sort of climate measurement of stuff, because I think it is changeable. And I think that's probably part of the challenge here is I think we want to create a culture and then that culture just stays the same. Like we create this, nobody leave, no one move, no one new join, and then the culture can stay exactly how it needs to stay. But that's not real. That's not real in any sense of relationships, families, people bolt on through marriage, different things. And I think there has to be an acceptance that climate or that culture will shift, in part because people are people and they're complicated, and therefore there's different behaviours and different things show up. So I quite like climate, and I quite like the analogy about the climate change and stuff in there. Again, I'm being very visual today.
Then you're going to like this. You're going to like this.
Oh, okay, go on.
Because we're going to go deeper into it.
Okay.
Where I live in Indianapolis tonight, we've got a risk of like really severe thunderstorms, potentially tornadic, hail, all this stuff. That's just here.
Yeah.
Other parts of the country, it's beautiful and sunny today. Yeah. And I think if you look at that from a company standpoint, parts of your company are going to have challenges, they're going to have issues.
Yeah.
Other parts are going to be fine. But what's the weather? What's the climate? What's everything looking like? Like that's the part leaders can't go in and jump in and all the hot spots, I guess.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Now I've got like a map of the United States with, rather than the states, it's like the functions in an organization.
That's it.
And then like
Mission
what the climate is on there. So it's good. It's good. Thank you very much. The next article today is about corporate value. So the headline was, if 92% of corporate value is intangible, why is PR still treated as an overhead? Now, this was in a recent Substack article from Stephen Waddington, who writes regularly about PR, the value of it, the strategic importance of it. And he's talking about the corporate value and PR today. He said, trust, governance and reputation are no longer soft assets. They are enterprise value. The global economy has shifted decisively towards intangible value, so brand, trust, intellectual property, culture and stakeholder confidence. Yet the discipline most closely associated with these assets still struggles to assert its role in enterprise value creation. The latest intangible asset market value study by Ocean Tomu, I don't know, but I'll put a link in the show notes, makes the shift explicit. In 1975, tangible assets accounted for 83% of the market value of the S&P 500. By the end of 2025, that figure had fallen to 8%. So intangible assets now represent 92% of market capitalization. This is a structural inversion of enterprise valuation, yet in many organizations, PR remains positioned as a communication support function rather than a strategic management discipline. Now, I know that Stephen is talking more about PR, but for me, this feels very relevant to internal comms and HR when the work around engagement and employee experience is so intangible. So, Chuck, what does this mean for demonstrating value or even measuring success for some of these functions in organizations?
I think, first off, I'm going to go with Tomo I think
Tomo.
Ocean Tomo.
Okay, thank you.
That is really cool data to think about how much of an like gigantic shift in 50 years that's turned on its head. Essentially, it just shows how business and the economy and everything else has changed, not just US, but around the world. I think this maps perfectly to comms. Trust, reputation, confidence, all those things have value, but they are very intangible. You can't go pick it up off the shelf. So it goes then to say that then that's the case, comms, HR, employee experience, they should be looked at as value creators. They're helping deliver those intangible assets, not just simply support functions. But I do want to call out too, when you think about this intangible stuff, it's obviously not what I just talked about, trust, reputation, confidence, all of that. It is things like software, brand, patents, intellectual property, like all of those things. That's the part of that's changed business. So I think it's worth calling that out. But I love the way this maps, especially when comms has been plagued for as long as we've been talking about ROI, of actually calculating that, because we've been looking for tangible things. I think now we can say, hey, a lot of the business is now completely intangible.
Yeah, I think when I saw this, and I receive Stephen's Substack emails regularly, and I sort of always glance through them, but this one for me stood out the most, I think, because it was just such a staggering number. 92% is intangible. And to your point, we're all, that ROI conversation is always there. I'm having so many conversations at the moment about the value of internal comms. What value does it bring? And how do we measure that? How do we demonstrate that? If I was working in internal comms today inside an organization, then I'd be getting this and going to my leader and saying, look, we don't, how do you measure all of these other things that are intangible? So this falls into that same bucket. Let's look at that as an organization, because I'm not sure that they are measuring some of these other things. I think there's quite an acceptance of the intangibility of them, yet somehow we feel like we do have to. I also do wonder whether there is a genuine need to measure as much as we feel there is a need to measure. So a lot of times when I talk to internal comms teams who are struggling with measurement, and I ask them, what are you being asked for? Nobody really has an answer in terms of we're being asked to demonstrate this, or we're being asked to prove this. It's more a case of we feel like we should. And so I wonder if we've created our own issues in here about how much we need to demonstrate it, if there is an acceptance of, hey, do you know what? It's intangible. And that's fine. And we measure intangible stuff this way, so this is how we're going to do it. I'm not sure that link has sort of been pulled together.
I think the other big takeaway, if I was in comms or HR on this, was the point of view that something being intangible is not a negative. There's not a negative connotation to something being intangible, because if that was the case, then 92% of your business would have a negative connotation. And I think now this is the point of saying there are parts of the business that are going to be intangible, and that's fine. There's still value created from that.